CMJ's Epic Quest. CMJ's Epic Quest. CMJ's Epic Quest.
Hey everybody, welcome back to D&J's Epic Quest. I am just, damn it, I almost said Justorian. I am Jay Rule, and joining alongside me here is
Derek Cronus. Derek. The only thing that probably would have gave it away to me, Justin, was your hesitation. If you would have just rolled with it, I don't know that I would have caught
it. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah. What do you do?
Going.
I mean, it's going all right. It's been a very busy week. I feel like every day this week we've had something to do. What about you though?
Wasn't too bad. Tuesday I was up in Minneapolis for work, and my boss took us down. My boss is Hispanic, and he took us to this Mexican restaurant on Lake Street. It was actually really good. I got this burrito that was like fucking massive. It was bigger than like 2 Chipotle burritos put together. I could only eat half the thing. We're driving down Lake Street in Minneapolis at it was like 11 or noon or whatever. And there's a cemetery along the street there. And there was like 8 deer in there, like downtown Minneapolis. Like,
oh, wow.
I wasn't counting on seeing. Yeah, it was pretty random. And one of them was just like squatting, just shitting everywhere. I'm like, oh man, that's like you just shitting on somebody's grave right there. But
that's funny. I know, I work, outside of downtown Minneapolis, and, we kind of live where I kind of work, there's a lot of like foresty, tree area in and around my school. So, and my office kind of faces those trees. So I usually see a lot of deer and turkeys, lots of turkeys just roaming around behind my office. Sometimes I'll see foxes back there. Not very often though.
Interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have expected to see deer where we were at, but
yeah,
it was this. I mean, I saw a lot of weird things, I guess, on just that short drive down that road. But
sure,
yeah, drug deal, a kid carrying a painting down the street. Why? I don't know. It's just what he was doing. Hood up, like it was like 65 degrees out, sweatshirt, hood up, carrying a painting. I don't know if he's going to sell it or what. I don't know.
Maybe. Who knows? But yeah, I guess before we get started in today's episode, we'd like to take a moment to thank and recognize Silverstone's Books. Please check out their website at silverstonesbooks.com, where they have a pretty large selection of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror books, and many of those being signed copies for pretty decent prices. The store carries a large number of indie authors, so please help us help them in supporting those self-published authors. Also, they've been gracious enough to give us a promo code for 10% off your next order. That code is DJ Quest, so check out their site, pick up a book, and save a little cash while supporting some indie authors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got an email from Kevin that a book that I pre-ordered is getting shipped out today. So that's exciting. A lot of these authors are, they're our friends. We interact with them on Twitter, and Kevin, definitely, a friend. And we got to still get down there yet, but it does take a community. So if you're looking for something, check out his website, or if you're in the area, check out his store. And if you look at his website and he doesn't have what you want, check out bookshop.org, and you can basically, I guess it's kind of like drop shipping, and he still benefits from it. You just got to set his store as the beneficiary, or however you want to word it. So he gets a percentage of the sales from that. So.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And our patrons, we've got Jan the Picker, Luciana Etrigan, Ryan the Topological, Damien the Rock of Faces, Nate Fiddle Me This, Shield Anvil Dylan, Calvin He Who Witnessed, Livia the Malazan Potato, and Aaron Mott Irregular. Thanks, guys. I never get tired of reading your names off. And for those of you listening, I'm pretty sure that free week is still active, right? Like that's just probably going to be a thing we'll have as long as they let us have it. So
Yeah.
Check us out. There's, I guess, including you and I, there's 11 of us, but 9 others besides us. We've got a good little group, and I think we have fun. Haven't gotten too rowdy yet, but we've named Damien our moderator for things. So just, you guys are helping us out, and I guess we could make you all moderators, but I don't know that would serve anybody. But
right.
We like to do what we can to give back to you guys. And then I haven't told any of our patrons yet, but they will probably get the news first. You and I are planning something for the end of this book. Reached out. Well, actually, I guess that's a lie. Nate knows. I reached out to Nate. He does know. He would be the only one so far. And then HC, she knows as well. So those are the only 2 I've talked to and they both seem interested for what we've got cooking and planning. But it's going to be a lot of moving parts. So details will be coming probably quite a bit later on that once we near the end of this book. Something, if we can pull it off, it'll be really fucking cool, I think.
I think so too. Maybe we should see if our Patreons want to join us.
Oh, I'm sure they would.
Yeah, I think that would be a blast. A little memories of ice party, so to speak.
Yes.
All right. Well, should we read the epigraph here for chapter 16 of Malazan's Memories of Ice?
Yeah, dude, take it away.
All right.
This is one of those BFEs.
Yes. The first child of the dead seed dreams of a father's dying breath and hears in eternal refrain the scream trapped in his lungs. Dare you step behind his eyes even for a moment? The first child of the dead seed leads an army of sorrow down hunger's bone-picked road where a mother dances and sings. Dare you walk in his steps and dearly hold her hand? The first child of the dead seed is sheathed in the clutter of failed armor, defending him from the moment of birth through years of dire schooling. Do not dare judge him hard, lest you wear his skin. Silba of the Shattered Heart, Kalas.
What do you make of that?
I feel like it has and ties into some things that we'll talk about in the last section.
Sure.
That makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I follow you. It just seems kind of weird sometimes to get like these, I don't know, deep takes on the Tenescowri when they're just kind of like this roving, starving horde. I don't feel like you would think like there would be much thought behind them, but there is.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely more to them than what they seem. So, yeah.
All right. Well, you ready to start this off?
Let's do it.
All right. The Tenescowri flooded against the walls of the city, a flood driven by hunger. Gates barricading the city buckled under the immense pressure, and Kabistan drowned. 400 paces from the barracks at Kovian fought off the never-ending swarm, his horse fighting under him as well. He had 3 mains of gray swords surrounding him from where they were cut off from the barracks. Itkovian could see the barracks gate, bodies piled high enough to climb over, which was exactly what the Tenescowri were doing. Even as they were jabbed and stabbed with pikes, they made no effort to defend themselves and were cut down. For all the battles that Kovian had participated in and seen, he had never witnessed anything like this before. The sights before him wiped all previous images from his mind. As men tumbled down the mountain of their comrades, women ripped the clothes off them and raped them as they died. Others simply fed upon their brethren. Itkovian was seeing twin nightmares, and he wasn't sure which one was worse, and his blood ran cold. Another wave surrounded Itkovian and his soldiers. The streets were packed with Tenescowri, all their eyes fixed upon Itkovian and his men, hungry hands reaching in the air for their flesh. The remaining gray swords locked shields and reformed their square around Itkovian. He knew in a few moments they would all be swallowed. He hoped they would rise back up and create a new mound of dead bodies and fighting those on the ground. And if he didn't kill them, then his horse would finish them off. He had never had to slaughter so many before, and it made him sick. Hate filled his heart. He hated that the seer could do this to his own people. Hate for Septarch Kolpath for sending peasants into the line of fire of a desperate army. The worst part of it all was that they appeared to be succeeding, though what Kovian thought it was at a cost beyond comprehension. The Tenescowri attacked. The first to reach the square were cut down and pulled back by those behind and devoured. Yet they continued to push forward, climbing over those that fell before them, climbing higher. For a moment, Itkovian saw a wall of humanity. Then it collapsed and buried the gray swords. The square buckled like the gates under the extreme weights. Weapons were caught, shields ripped away, helmets pulled off, and everywhere Itkovian could see, there was blood. Itkovian was the final target, and they came for him. He urged his mount into a continuous spinning circle. The horse defended itself as best it could while Itkovian kept swinging his sword. Itkovian kept fighting despite the odds. In the heat, through his helm, he was able to make out some of the landscape around him. The gray swords would not rise this time. The Tenescowri closed in on all sides. Corpses piled a man's height deep, and somewhere below them were his men, buried alive, buried dying, and buried dead. He could see pikes being passed up to those on the front line. In a moment, they would be used against him. Itkovian prayed to Fener. Twin tusks, I am yours. To this, the last moment. Suddenly he yelled a command to his horse. Break! The horse surged forward as Itkovian cut a path through those that stood in his way. He felt something puncture the small of his back. At the same time, his horse took a pike through the chest. Another person took a hatchet and lodged it into Itkovian's left shoulder and neck. He stabbed the woman who did this right in the face. She gurgled her last breath and fell away. A knife found its way to the soft flesh of his knee. The blade snapped, with about 6 inches remaining in him. At that moment, Itkovian felt no pain, only clarity as his God was with him in these moments. His war horse still fought on as it was dying, moving towards what looked like an open area. It was an avenue filled with still bodies. Pain finally came for Itkovian. His horse turned, facing where he had come from. His eyes couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was the gray swords fighting their way free of the bodies that buried them. He saw a dozen fighting, but it was a dozen more than Itkovian thought would be possible. He heard boots march up to him. Itkovian tried to focus on those arriving around him. It was Bruchalion. He apologized for arriving late. Behind Bruchalion, he saw Carnatus, looking pale as a ghost. Itkovian gasped for the destriant, begging for his horse and soldiers. Carnatus said Fener was with him. He would answer him. The last thoughts Itkovian had before he fell unconscious were for his horse and for his men.
Woofda.
Yeah, that's a hell of a start to this chapter, for sure.
Yeah. It reminds me of have you ever seen World War Z?
Not in a long time, but yeah, I have seen it.
Yeah. I mean, it just reminds me of just like that hoard, just people climbing on top of each other to yeah. That's all I could vision. Not necessarily the movie or the plot itself, but just the horde of zombies just trying to breach the city and eventually breaching it, and then just chaos ensues,
Yeah, because that's you're talking about the scene where they got the helicopter with the minigun on it and just keep climbing up towards it and stuff.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that fits. But yeah, I know. Last time, after we recorded the last chapter, I think I told you I was going to read this, and I did, and I was texting you, and I'm like, holy shit, dude. You
I remember that, yeah.
Read this, and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? I'm like, just read this, and yeah, it was a good time. I think being in a siege would suck. Fighting like this would suck. It would be terrible. Yeah, I'd had a few thoughts here if we want to get started on those.
Yeah, sure, man.
My first thought, man, what a shitstorm. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and you're still just fighting. But these battle scenes, I can envision, I feel fairly well, but just these Tenescowri climbing over each other, climbing over the gates and the walls. And they don't even care that, their buddies are getting stabbed, by the dudes on the, walls. They're just nailing them with pikes and stuff. And I don't know, it just seems odd to me. But then, I don't know. These guys are so starved that they're probably not thinking right. It's almost, like you said, World War Z. These things are just like zombies. But at the same time, I don't know. It's like shooting fish in a barrel to some extent for these guys on the walls. I mean, they're not even trying to defend themselves, but the only problem is there's just so many fish in this barrel. They're just getting out, you can't stop them all, but you just got to keep killing them.
Right. I mean, which is the Panians. I mean, that's a Panian strategy, as easy as that, right? Overwhelm. It doesn't even matter if they're armed, just overwhelm them. They succeeded,
Yeah, and I mean, you see it. They do it to themselves. They just rip each other apart when one of them dies. So, I mean, if you give them a target, they'll probably rip them apart before they're, dead. They'll kill them somehow. I don't know. But, some of the lines in here, a wave of humanity. Yeah, they're human, but how human are they really? It's almost like they're subhuman at that point. They're just mindless. And I already said it a couple times, just like zombies. It's just crazy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I would 100% agree.
Let's see. What was my next thought here? I really don't like doing this on my phone. A guy like Jacobian, I imagine he's seen quite a few battles, but he's never fought anything like this. And it's causing trauma for him, I think that's pretty wild that this guy I think we kind of get a little bit better idea of what the shield anvil is at the end of this chapter, but I guess he's just kind of like a guardian, but he's had to have been in other wars, had to have been in tons of other fights, but nothing as brutal and as vicious as this. I don't know. I couldn't imagine fighting somebody like that. I wonder what, if the Tenescowri are based off anything in our own real world history. Just off the top of my head, I can't think of what they would be similar to, I guess.
I mean, that could potentially be a question we ask at the party.
Sure.
Like if there's any theories about what the Tenescowri may be based off as far as real world events, but I don't know. I feel like it's possible, but at the same time, it's almost like too brutal.
Right. That's why I can't think of anything. And maybe they weren't quite as bad, but maybe there was some sort of basis for it. But I don't know. Just all this, this is what's desensitizing Itkovian and kind of resetting his field of vision in a manner of speaking, as far as how fucked up is fucked up. Well,
right.
This is it.
And I mean, he even says that, he sees twin nightmares, right? Like he sees the Tenescowri just eating, the citizens of Capistan and soldiers. But on the other hand, he sees real-time creation of children of the dead seed, yeah. So
yeah.
How do you be appalled by either of those two things when they're both equally appalling?
Yeah. I don't know what you thought. I guess I felt like I thought the Tenescowri, like the women, I didn't think they like raped their own, I guess. I thought it was just the opposing forces. But after reading this, I kind of get the sense that they don't really care.
What makes you think it's their own?
Because, it says, as men tumble down, and I don't remember if I took this part word for word, but men tumble down the mountain of their comrades, women ripped their clothes off and raped them as they died. Yeah, I just kind of always thought that the women of the Tenescowri got their seed, I guess, from the enemy. Now I don't necessarily think that's exclusively the case.
I mean, it says in the book here, and I'm just looking at it as you're talking, it says as peasants fell back, tumbled their way down the slope of corpses. Women leapt at the men among them, tore at their clothing, pinned them in place with straddled legs, and amidst blood, amidst the shrieks and clawing fingers, they raped them.
But these peasants, I think, are the Tenescowri. They're not, because the peasants of Capistan are all hiding in the tunnels.
I mean, that's never really explained, but I mean, I can see how peasants would be like synonymous with Tenescowri, but I think in this sense, it means like what peasants didn't make it to the tunnels.
I'm disagreeing with you on this one.
So, I mean, you very well could be right, but I guess I don't know. And I remember being confused about that when I read it. I'm like, what does he mean by peasants? Like, does he mean peasants of Capistan or does he mean Tenescowri?
Well, just like, so right now, like, yeah, you've got Jacobian out there and he's got his gray swords. Like, they're literally in a square around him. Like, they form a physical square. You wouldn't have peasants, citizens of Capistan out there. Like, these are like the trained gray swords, the trained soldiers anybody else should be the fuck away. That's like, I think that it must be the Tenescowri, because we already told they're climbing over their own dead and stuff, and they're just getting killed, piled up.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
Somebody out there wants
Maybe.
to, I guess, clarify for us. Definitely, yeah. It's not something I don't think either one of us would take a pie for, but
No. I think that's a it's still very interesting though that, like, again, we're reading the same words but interpreting things differently, because I guess I don't know why the Tenescowri would, like, if they are following this so-called belief system, why they would do that to their own, so to speak. It seems to be something that they do to non-believers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I get that too. Like, I definitely see your point. It's just, I don't know. Is it just because the opportunity is there to, I guess, like, replenish their numbers? Obviously, like, I don't think they have any problems about eating each other if one of them dies. We've seen that. But,
I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the Defier.
I thought they just, yeah. I didn't realize they took. God, I feel weird saying this. I didn't really think that they took seed from their own. I thought it was just like you said, but I don't think that's the case now. That was just a thought that popped into my head now. I didn't think about that when we were reading the chapter itself. So
fair enough. Okay, well, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. And if there's anyone out in the community that can correct us, we would love to have some more insight as to whether that is what they are doing or not.
And I mean, just the interaction itself is fun too. We get these ideas when we read things, and just to strike up a conversation with somebody else about it is always fun too.
Oh, for sure.
I think you might have to help me out a little bit, Justin. I think those were my only thoughts for this section. It's a little harder to see on my phone, but I think those were kind of the only two that I had.
That's all that I'm seeing. And I mean, it was a pretty straightforward section. And I mean, it was really messed up, straightforward section. But like, I mean, it's continuous action, which I think is great. The only thing that I would comment on is just Itkovian, just the level of determination that this character has at this point to just keep fighting. Like, that's all he's focusing on, is just to keep fighting, and hopefully something will happen, or you know what I mean? Like, it's just this faith that he has. He's just going to keep doing what he's going to do. It doesn't matter his thoughts. It doesn't matter his worries. It doesn't matter his anxiety. He's just going to keep doing it. Like,
yeah. Like, it would be so easy just to give up and
right. Just like, let me die. Like, there's no way I'm coming through this. But like, I'm right. Like what he says, like he prayed briefly to Fener, like, I am yours to the last moment, which means that he's going to keep going until he's surrounded and he has his last moment, but he's not going to willingly accept that last moment, which I thought was
right. I can see why Dylan likes the Shield Anvil and took that as his moniker. He's definitely a good character.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I didn't have anything else to say. It was great. It was a great way to open up the chapter. As you were telling me, like, hey, dude, you like, oh my God, you need to read this. So I did. I read it in one sitting, and I'm like, oh my God. I think there were many moments throughout this chapter when I first read that I like had to put the book down for just 2 or 3 minutes to process what had happened. And definitely after this first section was one of those moments where I'm like, you know what? I was not expecting that. I'm just going to put my finger on this page for a second, take a couple of deep breaths, think about what I'm doing and what happened, and then I would open it up and continue on.
Yeah, it was intense for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, outside of that, I'm ready to move on if you are.
Yeah, go for it, man.
So Gruntle and his followers had broken shutters to get into rooms above the ground floor of a building. They made their way through piles of bodies that had once been stairwells. Gruntle commanded that they use the bodies to create barricades. He was not tired, and the blood spatters on his arms formed a strange striped pattern, seeping into his skin. He didn't mind, though. They were Seerdomen riding with the tide of the Tenescowri. He cut down peasants that were in his way to get to the Seerdomen, for it was his only goal. His militia was 100 strong now, figures that were extensions of his will. Gruntle was satisfied. he had answered to what had been done to Stony. Stony now fought alongside his second in command, the Lestari soldier. They were guarding the rear stairwell together. He had met Stony once since withdrawing to this tenement building. What he saw had shaken him and had been shocked awake, as if this whole time his soul was hidden within him, as this unknown force ruled his limbs. He was broken still, and that recognition sparked a cold desire within his heart. She was the debt that he had only begun to pay. The ancient Aru tenement now housed Storm of Death. Gruntle compares the reality of the situation at hand to the world within his skull. There was no difference between out there and inside his mind. The truth begged for understanding, but could only be understood instinctively. He knew that where he was the definition of insanity. His militia fought with skills they had never had before, and they did not grow tired. Hallways were chest deep with piles of bodies. Some rooms couldn't even be entered. The attackers finally settled back, withdrawing back through the almost blocked stairwells and out the windows. Thousands more waited outside, but the retreat clogged their approach, and a moment of peace settled within the building. The Lestari lieutenant approached Gruntle and was told that they surrendered this floor now. The lieutenant said that they were out of room to move. Gruntle said that there were 2 more floors and the roof above them yet. The Lestari got chills as he looked into the black slits of Gruntle's pupils. In awe, he tells Gruntle that he is Treach's mortal sword. Gruntle frowned and asked about Stony. The lieutenant gives his report on Stony. The militia converged as if untold to do so, and was gathering armor and weapons and hauling food and drink. Gruntle stepped over bodies as he made his way to the stairwell. It was time to retreat to the next level. Gruntle thought that it was time to shove more souls down Hood's damned throat. Outside, he heard a resurgence, a tide of noise. So yeah,
it did not let up.
No, and again, it's just the whole canon that you have when you read this is just bodies everywhere. I can't imagine, we've all been in apartment buildings. I can't imagine those stairwells so filled with bodies that you can barely pass through them. I think of the show Hoarders, and instead of stuff and junk, it's just bodies. God damn.
Yeah. It's like a game of Tetris in there, I feel like. They're just, literally packed in like actual sardines.
Right. And I mean, Gruntle's using them to their advantage, right? Like, let's only give them one way to come in, and just slaughter them as the bodies fill up. You just kind of slowly move back and back and back and up and back and back and up. It's just crazy.
Get them demoralized.
I think it's funny that what he sees happening around him is kind of a shock to him, as for some reason his soul was hidden within him and this unknown force ruled his limbs. And yes, I think that this is just him realizing that he needs to avenge Stony for what the Seer Doman did to her. And I know that we talked about it a little bit via text message, but I think this unknown force he's recognizing is that of Treach himself. I think that he's kind of comparing himself to how he was before the siege and after, and even slightly during the siege. He just, again, we've had a very lengthy conversation about his apathy. And then when he ran into Stony and she kind of explained what had happened, there was like this fire in his belly. And I think that's kind of when that moment where Treach took over.
Yeah. And I know in that text conversation you and I had, because there was a line in here, and I had to go back and find it when I texted you the other day, but it was just the way it was worded, it made me think of Cruel, just because blood, it was almost describing warrens or blood flowing through warrens or something like that. And I think it was in this section, your first section here, and I know you said you had kind of the same thought, but it was just kind of weird how it reminded me of that, I thought.
Yeah.
Reminded me of Cruel.
Well, and I think that Cruel is definitely pulling some strings. I think that it was his intention to use Gruntle as Treach Reborn, or as this Lestari commander was saying, Treach's mortal sword, so to speak. I definitely could see both. I can see your perspective, and I can see mine as well. I lean more towards Treach than I do Cruel, but I definitely think that there's relation there.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't bet against that. It was just maybe it was just coincidence on how it was worded, but it just made my mind go there. But yeah, I think definitely Treach as well.
Yeah, and going back to your peasants conversation, or our peasant conversation. Now that you said that, because again, there was a part in here where he says he cut down peasants that were in his way. I'm assuming that means Tenescowri. For some reason, in my mind, when I first read it, I thought he was talking about peasants of Capistan. So I think going back to our conversation from the first section, I think you're right. Now that
Sure.
yeah.
I don't think he would just kill random peasants from Capistan. But I mean, really, they shouldn't be out and about at this point, anyways. If they are, I mean, kind of taking your own risk. Then you just kiss your ass goodbye. Really, you should be underground.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So okay. Well, all right then. I guess again, community. Go ahead and please have a conversation about it with us. But I think we found a conclusion.
I think so. Yeah.
But
I didn't even remember that part from your section.
That's all good. The other thing that I thought was really, really cool, and a small nod to Treach was, he's having this epiphany type moment within the section, and it's almost kind of a little bit overwhelming and confusing to the reader. But breaking it down, there's this part where he goes, "The truth begged for understanding, but only could be understood instinctively." I thought that this was kind of very animalistic, right? If you're trying to understand the situation from a logistical standpoint, you're going to be searching for answers, right? You're going to be lost. You're not going to understand what it is that's going on if you approach it from a logistical mindset. But if you approach it from an instinct, right? Like an animalistic instinct, it's easy, right? Survive.
That's all you got to do right now. That's all you can do.
Right. So I just thought that was really cool, and I wanted to point that out.
It's a good point, man.
The other thing that I thought was really cool, and again, this was kind of a shorter section, still kind of informational, but packed in with some action, is at the end here, it kind of, I get the sense that his militia of 120 or so, I'm not exactly sure what exactly the number is, but it was said that the militia converged as if not told to do so. It was just instinctive that they gather their armor, their weapons, they haul their food and drink as a well-oiled machine. It just, the way that it was described kind of makes me think of a pack, like a pack of wolves. But I know Treach is supposed to be the tiger, and I didn't think tigers hunt in packs. I always thought that they were kind of loners. It makes sense from an animalistic sense, but from being logical about it, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't think tigers do, but lions though.
That's true. Maybe it's a liger. Maybe Gruntle is Liger, the tree born, the liger of summer.
Nickname him Napoleon.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I mean, that's all I really have for that section again. And it was nice to see what Gruntle was up to. Obviously, he's surviving. They've got a plan. They seem to be taking out hordes of Tenescowri. I'm ready to move on if you are.
Yeah, we can move on. I wonder where his plan's going, because it seems like a short-sighted plan, because, I mean, I don't know if they got a doorway, or it's a trap door that whoever's coming up for him is going to have to climb through. But yeah, you can just hold up against that and just ram your pike, your spear down there and stab them as they come up. But
yep.
What are you gonna do?
I would imagine that they would just jump off. I mean, I could imagine there's just piles of bodies around this tenement that they could just cushion themselves into, so to speak. And I would imagine if I was putting myself in Gruntle's shoes, once I could no longer use the tenement, I would probably maybe look for another building where I could maybe do the same thing, or just rove the streets of Capistan for small bands of Tenescowri, because I doubt that they're all I'm assuming they're just in little pockets of each other at this point. They overwhelmed the city together, but now they're looking for their meal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Or it's just going to be a last stand on top.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for next part here?
I'm ready.
Sounds good. Bruchalion sat upon his war horse, and he watched Carnatus's cutters drag it Covian into the building that would serve as triage for the next couple of hours. Carnatus drew from his warren of Denul and stopped the bleeding from Covian's chest. The gray swords that had survived were being tended to by others. Still, some died and were pulled aside to look for more survivors. The cutters that now tended to Covian had the pleasant task of removing the weapons embedded within him, though in all likelihood they kept him alive. Carnatus would be there for those operations, stopping blood whenever it flowed. Bruchalion knew that Carnatus had overextended himself, using his warren too often and pulling too much from it. Bruchalion knew Carnatus would be dead by morning. But before then, Covian would be healed, though it would be brutal, and there would be no regard for the mental trauma that the wounds had caused. The shield anvil would assume command once more, but not as the man he had been. The mortal sword was a hard man. The fate of his friends was a knowledge that left no room for emotion. Everything was as it had to be. Bruchalion sat upon his horse and surveyed the area. The Tenescowri had been driven back, and none alive remained within eyesight. This was not the case everywhere, Bruchalion knew. He also knew that for all intents and purposes, the gray swords had fallen. There was likely pockets of resistance, but for all things considered, the city had fallen. A messenger had arrived on her horse. She said she had a message from Reve of Fener, passed to her by an acolyte. He asked for the message. She said the thrall was under attack. Reve of Fener invokes the Reeve's 8th command. You are to ride with all your company to his aid. Reve of Fener kneels before the hooves. You are to be the twin tusks of his and Fener's shadow. Bruchalion seemed to question this and asked how it was possible the acolyte managed to leave the thrall to deliver the message. She did not know. Bruchalion asked if she had to fight her way to deliver the message, and she told him that the streets were clear, only filled with the dead, which she could also not explain. He asked her to join him in the deliverance. The messenger said she would be honored. Bruchalion ordered the 11th Main to stay with the cutters. The rest would form up and march to the thrall. Reve of Fener has invoked the Reve, and they must answer. Bruchalion changed his mind on the messenger and ordered her to stay here and guard his horse. Also, once Covian woke, she would inform him, meaning Bruchalion, of his disposition. She didn't know what he meant. Bruchalion only said she would soon know. Facing his 400 gray swords, perhaps the last left, he asked if they were ready. An officer said they were ready to try. Bruchalion didn't understand. The officer said they had half the city to cross. They would never make it. Bruchalion said he would assume they would have to fight their way to the thrall. Bruchalion picked up a shield and said he would lead. Would they follow? Every soldier nodded, and Bruchalion saw in every one of their eyes that they knew that they had come to the realization they would not return. He chose the most direct route, and they followed. The path to the thrall was uncontested. When they arrived, the officer named Nobanus approached, saying he had heard the messenger's word. Bruchalion knew this. Nobanus pleaded that the message could not be from Reve of Fener. Bruchalion said, but it was. They were betrayed. Bruchalion said the words of the Reve were greater than he was. Nobanus said they should not abide. Bruchalion said they must, even if it cost their lives, for if they did not lose their lives, there would be no crime, therefore no punishment. Now they must choose the meaning of their deaths. Nobanus didn't understand what Reve of Fener gained from this. Bruchalion said only his life, for a short time. If the thrall is taken, he will be spared what the other priests will be subjected to. He deems this a fair exchange. Nobanus shook his head in disbelief that their god could allow these words to become betrayal. Bruchalion said Fener would not be the one to deliver the punishment. Nobanus was right, because the betrayal would leave him wounded, weakened, and vulnerable. Nearly sobbing, Nobanus asked who, then, would avenge them. Bruchalion told him even now, Covian should be regaining consciousness, and he would be the hand to strike back. This calmed Nobanus. Bruchalion smashed his sword against his shield, and black fire lit on the blade. He said they, the Panions, surrounded the concourse. Should they enter? Nilbana said they would with joy, along with the other 400 members of their force. Kolpath's troops quickly filled the streets. Archers filled in above, and Sir Doman playing dead before the thrall rose up. Nilbana said it was a pathetic showing. Bruchalion laughed loud enough for all to hear and said the Septarch thinks himself clever. Nilbanus replied, saying the Septarch must think they are stupid with honor. He roared defiantly, spinning his sword above his head. The grey swords locked shields and formed a ring around the mortal sword, while Nilbanus remained outside, still standing defiant, as 5,000 Panions and the Septarch looked on. Kolpath raised a gauntleted hand and dropped it. 1,500 bows whispered as one.
I hated this section when I read it. This is another one where I had to pause for a second before reading on.
Yeah, it sucked. It was just fuck, this is happening. This is how it's going down.
Yeah.
I know you and I had, again, through text message conversation, I feel like maybe I'm understanding now how they knew they were betrayed. I'm not entirely sure, but my thought must just be from Bruchalion questioning, how did this acolyte get out to deliver this message? Oh, and there was nobody there that you had to fight, to get here? Seems kind of fishy. So I think maybe that would be my hunch as far as how they know. And if that's not it, then I don't know how they figured out that they were betrayed.
That is how, yeah. It seems really small when you're first reading it. You're kind of expecting a bigger spectacle of betrayal almost, but it's definitely these small details, which makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, just reading it the first time, I was like, well, what is he picking up on? It doesn't make sense to me, but just, yeah, reading it a couple times and even just reading it out loud now to you, basically, it just, some of these things, they just kind of click a little bit later. Or maybe that's just kind of my thing is I just need to speak it out loud, get it. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, that's the benefits of discussing with somebody, right? You kind of just have those aha moments.
Yeah, that was kind of one of them. It reminds me of a joke I saw. What do you call two guys talking on the phone?
A conversation.
A podcast. Yeah.
Oh, funny. But yeah, I just, it was one of those things where even though that Bruchalion has somehow figured out that, this is a betrayal from Reve of Fener, I just love the line where he's just well, if we don't lose our lives, there can't be any crime, so therefore no punishment. This is how strong of faith this man has in Fener.
Yeah, well, and Eccovian too, he knows that there'll be revenge, but it's still, man, it still sucks to have to, you're going on a suicide run and you got to take 400 other people with you. Why couldn't he just show up by himself?
Right, because then he would be disobeying a command from, a priest of Fener, right?
I suppose that's right. Yeah, it does say to come with all your strength or however it was worded. But what if he just lied to himself and he's like, well, I don't have any soldiers left. They all got to stay here, so I'll just go. But maybe then that's not a big enough, I guess, sacrifice or betrayal or whatever to get the reaction they need, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's really hard to say, but I mean, I think it just goes back to Bruchalion's faith in Fener. He doesn't want to disappoint his god, even if it means dying, even if it means he knows that he's being betrayed. I think that Fener would understand the circumstances, but I feel like Fener would be way more pissed, because it didn't really hit me until I read this chapter and again kind of some of the things that happened to Eccovian later on. I get it now, right? The mortal sword, the shield, anvil, right? It's Fener's sword and shield.
Yeah, I kind of had that realization that they complement each other, they got to work together. And I don't know why, why didn't we really see that earlier in this book?
I don't know.
It was definitely this chapter too for me that we're and yeah, it just seems weird that we didn't pick up on that till now.
Hey, we picked up on it. That's all that matters.
But yeah, thanks for bringing that up and I would have forgot about that, but I did definitely have that thought.
Awesome. I'll take it.
I think that kind of covers my one point that I had there. The other thing, dude, Nilbana, what a badass. I just think, again, seeing this square of dudes, in their formation with their shields locked and you got this one crazy fucker out there spinning his sword around like he's psycho, and then they all get shot.
Right. It's got
Like, that
black
sucks.
fire just roaming around, It's pretty damn cool. It was a cool scene. And again, one that I had to take a breather from because I wasn't expecting Brucalion to, die.
Yeah. No, not at all. I wasn't expecting it, or just suddenly like that, but it was a badass scene. That line, 1,500 bows whispered as one. I really liked that line, and I just took that one straight out. But yeah, Mortal Sword, I guess he kind of lived up to his name. He was mortal, so... And I wonder what Itkovian's reaction will be. I mean, I guess we kind of see a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have any other thoughts on that section. Again, it was a shorter section, but still kind of long, just because there was a lot of conversation happening. But yeah, I'm ready to move on if you are.
For sure. Let's do it.
All right. Itkovian's eyes snapped open, hearing that whisper. He saw with a vision the destruction of the Grey Swords. Nilbanus, pierced by 100 arrows or more. In a roaring mass, the Panian foot soldiers surged into the concourse. The battle was turned to slaughter as the Panians met the surviving Grey Swords. Still standing, the mortal sword whirled his blade, raged with black fire. Studded with arrows, he stood like a giant amongst children. He fought on. Pikes drove into him from all sides. His sword arm swung down. He chopped through the pike's shafts. Itkovian watched as a double-bladed axe severed the mortal sword's arm at the shoulder. His shield arm fell away as blood poured out. He folded to the right, and more pikes plunged into his torso. His grip on the sword didn't falter, though, and he sent a wave of fire outward, incinerating as it went along. Screams now filled the air. Erdomen closed in and started slashing and chopping. The mortal sword's intestines were pulled away from his body. Another axe crashed down and split the mortal sword's skull. The burning sword exploded in a flash, shards cutting down more Panians. The corpse that was Fener's mortal sword collapsed to its knees and then fell over to the ground. Within the shadow of the thrall, the Panians withdrew on all sides, staring at the hacked-up bit of body that was Brucalion. They also stared at a tall apparition that took form directly behind the mortal sword. Hood, king of High House Death, comes to greet the soul in person. But why? A moment later, the king of High House Death was gone. No one moved, and it then began to rain. Itkovian saw that another pair of eyes shared his vision. In the shield anvil's mind came a cold satisfaction. And in his mind, he addressed the other witness and knew that his words were heard. I have you, Wrath Fener. You are mine, betrayer. So I actually have quite a bit of thoughts on this very short section. I thought it was really cool that we're getting, Itkovian is essentially having a vision of what's happening or what's taking place. They could have easily just been tagged on to the end of the last section, but he decided to kind of do it in this interesting way, which I thought was really cool. But my first thought is just this: studded with arrows, he stood like a giant amongst children. And it was just a really powerful image and thought. And even as sad as it is, right? He just fucking badass is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Till he had nothing left, he was fighting.
Right. And then the burning sword kind of exploding in a flash after he dies. I wonder if this is like a self-destruct type of thing when Fener's mortal sword dies. His weapon just kind of explodes in a last attempt to take out as many as it can.
Oh, I didn't even think of anything like that. That's a good thought. Maybe.
So, yeah, just a thought. Just kind of felt like a grenade going off,
Oh, good idea. Yeah, very well could be.
And then this other thing with Hood, right? So do you think that Hood will make a deal with Brucalion? I mean, it wouldn't have been the first time that Hood tried to get Brucalion to switch sides, right? And not really sides, but switch gods. And I got a feeling that he might not really be dead, but potentially working for Hood now. What do you think?
I don't know. If he comes back, he's going to have to be in a different body, which I don't know why that couldn't be possible. I don't know. I know when I read that and like fucking Hood showed up, like what the hell is going on? Like this is a pretty big deal if he's showing up. So I think Bruchalion must be pretty important if the god of death shows up to take your soul. But yeah, as far as making a deal or something like that, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm open to the possibility. I definitely would not write it off.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know if he's totally dead. I think that he's probably gonna make a comeback somewhere in the story. Where I don't know. This book probably not. Next book maybe. I don't know, but I just know that when Gethel was still working for Hood as the Herald, Bruchalion and him had a conversation about like accepting Hood's deal or something. So
yeah, we could definitely see him back at some point. I wouldn't be terribly surprised.
okay, all right. Last thought is I have a sneaky suspicion that Reve of Fener and the Crippled God are working together.
Think they're in league with each other somehow?
I think so. And I think this is the reason why Fener falls, because I feel like with everything that happens throughout this chapter, essentially by the end, you only have 1/3 of your highest people left, right? So I think that this is why Fener essentially, I think this is why Fener is walking amongst the mortal world. The scene that we saw in Dead House Gates. And I know I talk about that all the time, but it's something that I think about all the time. And especially when we're going through this book, there's a lot of moments where I'm like, I wonder if. But I kind of almost feel like this is it. This is the reason why Fener fell, is because of this betrayal, which again, I know we kind of talked about how almost small this betrayal felt, but I feel like there has to be bigger reasons, and this kind of makes sense to me, right? This is a big betrayal because now Fener can no longer do anything. He's stuck in the mortal world, right?
Yeah.
That's just kind of me tying events to the last book, which I thought was cool. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But I liked it.
Well, it's hard to know if we're going to find out if we're going to get a definite answer on that, but maybe we will.
That's true.
We'll have to just read on and find out.
Yeah. Well, we can after we finish recording here. So
right.
But yeah, with that, I'm ready to move on if you are.
Sure. Buke flew through the rain clouds as the nimble sparrowhawk. The day may have been drawing to a close, but the horrors he had seen did not stop. What he had seen had left him numb. The bird's eyes were far too sharp. He flew over Bauschlein and Corbel Broach's home, bodies stacked everywhere. The walkways were manned by their animated corpse army. Hundreds of Tenescowri had broken into the building and were greeted with waves of deadly sorcery. The spells kept working even after they were dead. Soon the ground was covered in ankle-deep dust. Even still, 2 more desperate attempts were made by the Tenescowri. However, they were repelled each time, and even fled in fear at the end. A company of Becklights tried in the afternoon with the same result. The streets around the estate were now only home to the dead. Buke climbed the air once more, following the city's main avenue. He saw demolished buildings and seething mobs of Tenescowri, bonfires, cooking people, and other units patrolling. He could see their agitation as they couldn't find the citizens of the city, and that they must have felt cheated. With the daylight fading, his eyesight started to diminish as well. He could see the prince's palace, and it didn't seem like much was happening there. He hoped they were still holding. The other option was that it was now home to more ghosts. His eye caught sight of another building, but he thought it must have been a mistake. Fires surrounded it, but the building didn't seem to be taking to the flames. It was the building Gruntle had taken residence in. The bodies were piled so high he couldn't see the ground floor. Yet, it still would not burn. He could see the walls weeping. He knew it was not water, but blood. Buke flew closer. The closer he got, the more horrified he became. Each floor, each room he looked into was packed with bodies, all the way to the roof. He saw a dozen or so figures standing on the roof, one standing apart from the others, head bowed as if he looked at all the death below, studying it. In each hand he held a cutlass. A few paces behind Gruntle flew their standard, the child's tunic. Buke flew closer, then turned around. He was not ready. He was not ready for what Gruntle had become. He thought he was another victim of war, of the siege, a terrible transformation, just as all the rest had gone through.
I thought this section was really cool because, like, in your mind, everything up until this point, you're in the perspective and the point of view of being in the city with everybody else. But here you've got that bird's eye vision, that helicopter vision of things that you're seeing. And I just thought it was a really good stark difference between what we've seen so far already, and like it just adds to the chaos that's already there.
Yeah, kind of getting that bird's eye view is neat. I mean, I think in a lot of this chapter, a lot of these battles, we get kind of that focused perspective of what whichever character's going through. We had Gruntle in the building, and now we're getting that overhead view. We had Itkovian with what he went through, Bruchalion, what they went through, and yeah, now just kind of all encompassing everything going on. It stuck out to me that whatever Bauschlein and Corbel Broach are doing, that they managed to scare the Tenescowri, which I feel like is probably quite an accomplishment in itself.
I would agree. I mean, I thought it was almost kind of comical. I'm glad to see that where Bauschlein and Corbel Broach probably aren't doing this to help Capistan. It's more just kind of like a self-preservation type thing, and probably appeals to what Corbel Broach wants to do with bodies anyway. But still, it was nice to see them helping, even though they're not helping, if that makes sense.
They're not helping, right? Yeah,
right.
Exactly. This look that Buke gets into the building, just fucking hell, man. Just every room. It makes me think of like, God, this can sound terrible. But I just think of like our high school, like Mankato West, like a bird flying by that, because that was, a pretty normal like looking structure, I guess. It's a few floors, and just like he's flying by in every room, on every floor, just packed full of bodies. Yep. Or maybe, at an apartment building. Same thing. Jesus Christ, like that's tough. And again, it's, somebody else seeing horrible shit that they've never seen before, or as bad. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, for sure. It's, again, just it brings you back to section 2, where they haven't even filled up the second and third floor or the roof yet. And now, a few sections later, it's all filled up. So,
yeah, it didn't take long.
No, I'm assuming this is within a span of like 6 to 8 hours, but still, like, damn.
Or yeah, whatever the time frame is. Yeah, a few hours, probably. Yeah, not more than that. Much more. Exactly. And my last thought, just this last sentence of the part of the chapter: terrible transformation, just as all the rest of them had gone through. And I imagine that nobody's the same after going to war. Even if you didn't see combat, but I imagine Gruntle, it's more personal for him than anything, and I don't know that he would be this leader he's become if what happened to Stoney, if that didn't happen. I don't feel like he would have that burning rage to murder, not kill, but he wants to murder all these Seerdome and not kill just to stay alive. He wants that revenge. He's gonna get it, I think. But if that didn't happen, is he the same guy? Still going to be changed, I think, but again, this just seems different.
Yeah, I would agree, and I feel like these next 3 sections really kind of summarize what it is that you're alluding to.
Well, you want to keep going? That's all I had there. We can get to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. Itkovian woke up and struggled to make sense of his surroundings. Laying on a cot, he felt someone holding his hand. He turned to look to see who it was. Pain lashed his wound where the axe had been. Carnatus was at his side, looking to be on the verge of death. Itkovian squeezed the Destrian's hand. The Destrian lifted his head and explained to Itkovian that he had failed. Itkovian assures Carnatus that he didn't fail, as his wounds had been healed, and this, his gift, humbled him. Carnatus whispered that he was done. Itkovian said that he knew, but the shield anvil wasn't done. The Destrian nodded, but did not look up. Itkovian took a look around the room. 4 bodies were on cots, 2 cutters sleeping with their backs against the wall, and a young Capan messenger. He asked Carnatus how long he had been unconscious for and when did it start raining. Carnatus didn't answer. Neither did either surgeon. The young captain cleared her throat and told him the time and when it had started to rain. Idkovian asked for a report, and the Capan gives it to him. Idkovian slowly released his grip on the destriant, and after some silence, the shield anvil asked the messenger to fetch an orderly, as the destriant is dead. The shield anvil gathered up his boots and winced as he turned to put them on. He asked if there were any armorers left, as he needed a brace made for his busted knee. She replied that she would go get some, but then started to say his name before stopping. Shield Anvil looked at her and saw that her face was deadly white. She reveals that she was the one that delivered the message to Bricalion, thus sending him to his death. She asks for Ickovian to punish her. The Shield Anvil denies her request and tells her to continue to find the armorer and the orderly. With tears welling in her eyes, she left the room. Ickovian got up and hobbled around. He whispered to himself that he was not done here. So yeah, I think it kind of brings back your point. He's still kind of got that determination, but it's not really survival anymore. It's survival and revenge.
Well, it's interesting that we have kind of two characters that have that revenge motivation, right? I mean, Gruntle and Ickovian. I didn't really think about that until now either.
That's true. I didn't even think about that until you mentioned it. Like I said, I think that Gruntle and Ickovian are not really partnering up, but they're partnering up to kind of just do what they can. They just create as much damage as they can.
Yeah, it's like it's going to be good cop, bad cop, but with two bad cops.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Again, it was a really short section. I think that it's just kind of building up. These next two sections are building up towards the last. And the only other thought that I had here is like, again, I wasn't expecting the Destriant to be dead. Definitely put down the book at this point too. I'm like, oh my God, Bricalion, and now the Destriant. Like, oh my God.
You're like, no more Carnitas. No.
Right. No more. So yeah, it'll be weird. It's like, I mean, they just got introduced to us in this book, but they served their purpose and now they're gone, I guess, for the meantime.
Yeah, for the meantime.
Is anything really dead in this world? Not always. Not always.
Not always, yeah. Well, ready for me to take my small section here?
Yeah, your last one, sure.
Oh man, are we really at the end here? I guess your last section was a little bit longer.
Yep.
All right. 137 souls looked upon the shield anvil. Through the rain, he looked at them as they stood in ranks. They had 2 war horses left, his own and the mortal swords. The messenger held the reins to both. Ickovian's armor had been repaired and his knee braced. Ickovian addressed his forces, saying they had work to do. They marched to the prince's palace. It is not far, and the enemy has mostly formed around the thrall. If they do encounter anyone on the way, it will likely be a small force of Tenescowri, so they will likely be untrained and underarmed. They would march quickly. He addressed his lone captain and told her to array the squads. He took the horse reins from the messenger and said that the captain would be walking with the soldiers. Someone should ride the mortal sword's horse. He said the horse was hers and it would keep her safe. The messenger nodded, and Ickovian told her to mount up and they would ride.
Yeah.
Not really much to say there.
No, I mean, I think it's just kind of, it leads right into the last section here. So
yeah, just is the only thing I would comment on is, we know how many people we got. We got 137 and they're going up to at least 5,000, right? Well, I guess with what happens, not necessarily, but I mean, we knew there was 5,000-ish that took out Bricalion, 1,500 archers, and then, 3,500 other people. Maybe they could have dispersed, but going up, they're going to be out. I mean, they've already been outnumbered, so it's nothing new, I guess.
Well, and I think, again, I think that he's not taking all of them. I think he's taking like half or a little under half with him. So,
yes, yeah.
But then again, I could be wrong. I guess maybe. Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, he is bringing all of them. Yeah, it's answered in my next section.
Oh, all right. Well,
so yeah, I'm ready to finish her off, man.
Yeah, let's bring it home here. I think this will definitely be a quicker episode than we're typically used to.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would imagine about maybe an hour, 20 minutes or so. Yeah, it was a short chapter, so yeah, it makes sense. Itkovian made his way through the rain and the eerie, empty streets to Jolarkin's palace. When they arrived, there was nothing but silence to greet them. The mortal sword had asked for 6 weeks. Itkovian had given him less than 3 days. The thought of this wrapped pain around his heart. He thought to himself that he wasn't done yet. With a renewed vigor, he fixed his stance. He sent scouts to the gateway. After some time, one of them returned to explain that there were Tenescowri inside. They were celebrating and feasting, and it didn't appear that any of the entrances were guarded. He tells his captain to position a squad at each of the side entrances, and the rest were to join him. The shield anvil dismounted and was given his shield. He lowered his visor on his helm and gave out orders as to how they would progress forward. His soldiers got into formation, and the captain said that they were ready. He strode up the ramp with his 53 soldiers following behind. They made their way through the antechamber. They could hear low rumblings from behind the oak doors. Itkovian didn't hesitate at the doors, shoving them open violently with his shield. His troops spread out and took command of their end of the long vaulted chamber. Everyone in the room's heads snapped around to see the entrance. Annister's mother shrieked and ran to Jolarkin's throne where Annister sat. Annister calms his mother and then explains that these were guests who were just late for the royal feast. On the table was a spit, a body no longer turning. Itkovian knew that the horror he saw on that table wasn't because these Tenescowri were hungry. They actually looked pretty well fed. To the left of the throne, Itkovian saw Prince Jolarkin's skin stretched out in an X shape. Annister explains that he is not so cruel, as the prince was dead before they began cooking. He guesses that Itkovian must be the shield anvil of Fener, as Brucalion is dead. 40 Seerdomen stepped out from behind the throne and spread out. Annister smiled and said that Itkovian's soldiers looked tired and not ready for the task at hand. He introduces himself as Annister, first child of the dead seed. Annister questions Itkovian about where all the people have gone, but guesses that they were in tunnels underneath the city. Annister assures Itkovian that these tunnels will be found and Capistan will be cleansed. Itkovian studied Annister and saw that he didn't expect to see, and that was despair. Itkovian tells him that he will take it from the first child. Annister jolted as if he had been struck. He cowered into the throne itself, while his mother shrieked. Itkovian continued and said that he wasn't Annister's father, but he would be as him. Annister stared and bared his teeth as he asked who Itkovian was. Itkovian's captain answered the first child and explained that Itkovian was Fener's human heart to assume the sorrow of the world. The captain continues on to say that these last days and nights have witnessed vast sorrow and shame. Itkovian adds that Annister couldn't deceive himself and to give all his despair to the shield anvil. Annister screamed and stood up on the throne with arms wrapped around himself. No one in the hall moved. They all just watched him. The first child stared at Itkovian and whispered that he would not have his despair. The captain hissed, saying that this offer was a gift. Annister snapped and said that it was not. It seemed to cause the shield anvil to falter in his stance a bit. Annister repeated that they cannot have it. The captain, while supporting Itkovian, said that she didn't understand. Itkovian said that he did, because Annister is nothing without despair. Annister shrieked and said that he wants all of them killed. Seerdomen surged forward on either side. The captain issued orders, and the front line of soldiers ducked as the crossbowmen behind stepped up and fired. All 24 bolts hit their mark. The soldiers waiting on the sides fired their bolts as well. The front line rose and readied their weapons. Only 60 Seerdomen remained standing. The Tenescowri were now fleeing from the table to a portal beyond the stone, behind the throne. Annister and his mother were first through. A Seerdomen charged Itkovian. The shield anvil thought to himself that he is not done yet. He swung his sword, and the Seerdomen's head was cut off. Afterwards, the gray swords were the only ones left. He instructed his captain to retrieve the prince's body and have his skin taken down. the room they will now hold for the time being. The captain started to say the first child's name when Itkovian said that he'd be back, as the shield anvil is Fener's grief and therefore Annister's only salvation. Woofda.
I think that was my favorite part of this chapter. I mean, like, yeah, all the battle stuff was like cool and like, I mean, just brutal, and no doubt that stuff's fun to read. But this, you know, when he said, you know, I will take your grief, or, you know, however it was worded, like, man, I was not expecting that to be, I guess, in his powers or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but I guess it doesn't really matter. I feel like there's something here with this kind of like, you know, Annister is nothing but despair, but to give that despair to Shield Anvil, for he is his salvation. I feel like there's something there. I don't know what though, because I feel like this is kind of the first introduction of that concept. So I'm curious to see what comes of it.
Well, I mean, the Tenescowri kind of run on despair. If you take away Annister's despair, I mean, does it get replaced with hope? And then, you know, what can the Tenescowri, are they going to respond to that?
I mean, the way that they're making Annister sound is that there's nothing but despair in him. So if you take the despair away, so does Annister, which I think would have long-lasting repercussions for the Tenescowri themselves.
They're just leaderless.
Essentially, you know, cut the head off the snake and the body falls, or whatever the saying is.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be good with the Tenescowri, because then they would, I don't know, maybe somebody else tries to take up the mantle, or they just disperse, and I don't know then what happens.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, and you know, like I said, I don't know what's to come of it. I think that it's an interesting concept, but I don't know what to make of it. You know?
Yeah, I can agree with you.
I could see for what it is at face value, but I don't know what else that could possibly derive from what's happening here, you know?
Right.
The first thing is just, man, the weight that must be on Itkovian's shoulders. Again, it's just this whole line where the mortal sword had asked for 6 weeks, and Itkovian feels personally responsible that he couldn't even give him 3 days. And it just, the thought of that just pained him so much, and it just, I felt the weight too that he was feeling, and it was cool.
I don't know how you could be disappointed in the fact that you didn't even get 3 days. I mean, it's a miracle they made it as long as they have.
Oh, for sure. Against these overwhelming odds, absolutely.
And just the politics of the city, things being divided and all that, none of that helps.
Right. Yeah. All of the unforeseen, you know, kinks in the chain. But, you know, what is great, though, is what makes that so powerful is the line that comes directly after that, and his thought to himself, again, that he's not done yet, you know, and I just love that he's not lying down, especially when his last thought was so heavy.
Right. I did like how that was kind of repeated. I am not done yet. I am not done. You know, yeah, there's more to do.
Right. How did you feel about Annister's mother in this section?
I don't know. I didn't really think of her. I didn't know. I mean, she's just there.
She just kind of seems like a screaming lady. She just always seems to be screaming in here and like, you know, rushing to Annister, almost like she's feral. You know what I mean?
Well, she probably kind of is.
Well, right. And I'm sure that she is, but there's almost this like, I don't know. I just get like this very like sophomoric vibe from her.
I don't know if I know what that word means.
Sophomoric. Oh, relating to or a characteristic of a sophomore. So like a young adult.
Gotcha.
Or like a young teenager.
Just using big words on me, Justin.
Sorry, man. So yeah, which kind of almost makes me think that maybe my theory is right, and that maybe it's the sister Jaghut from the Rent of Morn, but I don't know. She just doesn't seem very articulate with her words, you know, almost kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, I would agree she is that.
One of the other thoughts that I had was Annister like calming his mom and being like, you know, no, it's okay. These are simply just guests who are late for the royal feast. You know, I just thought it was really sinister.
Yeah, well, because you know they would have eaten them. They would
Oh,
have killed him and eaten him up.
right, exactly. And they were the royal feast, essentially. So,
Right.
when they're talking about Prince Jalarken's skin stretched out in like an X shape, it just, for whatever reason, triggered in my mind, and it's all authority and all control is gone, right? Brucalian's gone, Carnatus is gone, Jalarken is gone. It's just like absolute chaos. And it's just weird. It's weird thinking about that. What was control in the first chapter of the siege has just transitioned to no control. They had a plan, it didn't work, and now everything is gone. Everything is lost.
Well, it's like what's the saying? Like everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yep.
They just got punched in the face by like 10 people at once. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. And they're trying to eat their face. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you caught this, dude, but when Annister explains that he wasn't so cruel and that the prince was dead before they began cooking, the body on the table was Jalarken. And I didn't catch that at first. The body
I don't know
spit like they were roasting his body and they stopped. Yeah, see, on the table was a spit, a body no longer turning. It's Prince Jalarken's body, and they just skinned him, put his skin up in like an X shape, and were roasting his body.
They are a lovely bunch
of coconuts and deedly-dee. Yeah, again, we kind of talked about the despair versus the grief, and I'm not sure again where that's going, but I'm interested to see where it takes us. The last thought that I had in this section was seems that somebody opened a warren behind the throne, and the Tenescowri and Annister and his mother fled. So I know that you had a question about whether the Tenescowri were able or had mages. I think this answers it.
Yeah, well, for sure. I didn't remember before if there was any. I don't remember noticing mages before. That's all.
Yeah,
basically all that comes down to.
Fair enough. But yeah, dude, what a cool chapter.
Just brutal is about the only word I can think of to describe it. And like, where do you go after that? Like, how much worse is it going to get? How do you follow up that chapter with something else? Like, I don't know, it just blows my mind because, yeah, this book, I don't know. I know I said like the first half I wasn't enjoying as much, and it's not that I didn't like it, but just I was used to that pace that we had in Deadhouse Gates, and now it kind of feels like we're returning to that a little bit, and I don't need, a breakneck pace the whole way through for every book, but it was just kind of that anticipation, like I know shit is building, and I know it's gonna pop off here pretty quick or at some point, and I don't know, it's gonna be insanity, and I think we're pretty much at that point now.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Yeah, I guess, do you have any predictions for what we're going to read next?
No. I don't know. I don't know I'm not sure who we're going to go back to.
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like Ganoes and Quick Ben are the ones that we haven't seen in a while, so I hope we get to see them. But also, I'd like to know what's happening to Talk. Like, that would be cool. We also haven't gotten much of Lady Envy and the Segula lately, so hopefully we see them too. But I guess it's hard to say, But, last chapter focused around, like, Whiskey Jack and Krupp and Caladan Brood and all those guys in the Mybe. So I don't know if we'll go back there, but I guess anything's possible,
It is, yeah. I don't know that we'll see, that I wonder if we'll get the follow-up to this chapter. I don't know that it'll be the next chapter that we read. I think we'll cut to somebody else here, and maybe we'll get a few different groups of people. Maybe we'll bounce around a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. But this next chapter takes us to 543. The start of this chapter is 497. So we got a good chunk of stuff coming up. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Oh boy, yeah, that's going to be a big one. So yeah, well, next week I think the plan is to finish up Curse, right? We'll wrap that up and then we'll focus on Malazan for a bit.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. All right, man. Well, I gotta go get dinner and get it made, and yeah.
Well, good luck. And if you start reading this tonight, let me know. I don't know that I'll get a chance to read it tonight, but otherwise I'll start reading it tomorrow morning. But it was a lot of fun talking about, and it was a great chapter, and I think it'll be a good episode.
I think so too. Yeah, it was fun. It's always a good time.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your night, dude.
You too. Have a good weekend, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
All right, later, dude.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
DMJ's Epic Quest. DMJ's Epic Quest. DMJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest.